I thought you'd be interested in this report by CBN News, and this is by their newsletter Faith Wire by Billy Hollowell, and it's titled, "What Does Russian President Vladimir Putin Believe About God?" That's a fascinating question the world can't answer with any certainty, according to Mark Tooley, president of the Institute on Religion and Democracy. After all, there's a difference between what Putin says and what he does, and there's strangely a great deal of uncertainty and confusion intermingled with both. Putin had a devoutly Christian mother and has worn a crucifix around his neck for most of his life, Tooley told FaithWire. Certainly he has embraced the patronage of the Russian Orthodox Church and used it to advance his own political purposes domestically and internationally, but that is a centuries-long tradition for Russia. Tooley explained that Russian Orthodoxy to the outside world might seem to position Putin's country to be in perfect alignment with Western religious ideals, though fundamental differences between the cultures reveal stark incompatibilities. Russia's brand of Christianity. Rather than spiritual compatriots, the Christian faith seen in many Western countries is radically different from the Russian rendition of self-described government-aligned religiosity. Listen to Tooley explain what Putin might believe, Russia's religious background, and why Ukraine is in the crosshairs. Russia is a long-time nemesis to the West, precisely because of its version of Christianity. Tooley recently wrote in a World magazine article, Russian Orthodoxy for centuries saw itself as guardian of the true faith, in contrast to Western Catholicism and Protestantism. Moscow, according to this lore, is the third Rome, the seat of Christendom, after Constantinople and the Roman Empire. Now remember that the rabbis had stated that the Messiah was soon to appear imminently when Constantinople was overtaken by the Russians. So this is interesting. Tooley argued this ideology even permeated the Soviet Union despite its anti-religious bent, and has colored certain aspects of how Russia views Ukraine today. The religion expert affirmed Russian Orthodoxy has nearly always been a cheerleading nationalist subordinate to the state. Despite Russia's penchant for state-sponsored religion, he believes the nation is more secular than many Western countries, which might be surprising to some. Despite the Soviet Union's initial attempts to kill religion, its political usefulness was eventually recognized, Tooley said, and today that persists. With all this in mind, it's easy to see why Putin and the state are so interested in religion, particularly when it comes to Ukraine. Harry Farley of the BBC recently said, Putin views himself as a messianic figure, a savior to reunite Eastern Orthodox churches under Moscow. Then they have a picture of Putin here, and he's kind of standing before a cross. It says, Russia's Vladimir Putin crosses himself while bathing in the icy water in -4 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures during an Epiphany celebration near Moscow, January 19, 2021. Water that is blessed by a cleric on Epiphany is believed to have special powers of protection and healing. And this photo is Mikhail Klementiev, Sputnik Kremlin pool photo via AP, the Associated Press. You can see Putin is in the pool there. The theological circumstances in Ukraine and Russia become increasingly concerning when considering the Orthodox Church in Ukraine was granted autonomy just 3 years ago, freeing itself from Russian control. Despite a portion of the Orthodox Church in Ukraine still recognizing Russian authority, the schism has grown. The Orthodox Church in Ukraine just 3 years ago gained its autonomy, and its chief bishop was recognized by the Patriarch of Constantinople as having his own distinct authority, no longer subordinate to the Patriarch of Moscow, Tully explained, which obviously the Russian Church and the Russian state did not like. There's a complex history surrounding these issues, but historian Catherine Kalidas has explained the Patriarch of Constantinople, who has claimed the mantle of leadership for Orthodoxy, is more aligned with the West, whereas the Patriarch of Moscow, who heads the Russian Church, has a more traditional stance, along with other distinctions. Regardless of finer points of the history, know this: the Ukrainian Church's decision to split in 2018 was seen as historic. At the time, former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko praised the move. This day will go down in history as a sacred day, the day of the final independence from Russia, he said. What happens next? It's unclear what would happen if Russia took complete control of Ukraine. However, it is possible, even likely, the Russian Orthodox Church would attempt to regain control over its Ukrainian counterpart. Putin has repeatedly made clear he views Ukraine and Russia as sharing a spiritual space. Thus, this issue presumably hasn't left the forefront of the radical leader's mind. Ukraine is not just a neighboring country for us, he recently said. It is an inalienable part of our own history, culture, and spiritual space. Now let's consider how these connections and Putin's pining for control of the Ukrainian people comport with his personal religious practices. Farley offered a compelling recap, shedding some light on Putin's perspective. Moscow and the Russian Orthodox Church became this huge power within the Orthodox Church. But in 2019, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church split off from Russia and was recognized as independent, he said. Religion is hugely important for Putin's identity, for his psyche. He immerses himself in icy water to mark the festival of Epiphany. He wears his baptismal cross. What does Putin really believe? This brings us back to our original question. What does Putin believe about God? Again, it's unclear. Despite speaking about faith and spiritual issues and taking part in religious rituals, the Russian leader has been remiss at moments to say what he believes specifically. In fact, he was infamously ambiguous on the matter in a 2007 Time magazine interview. The outlet told Putin many Americans view Russia as a godless country, highlighting how Putin has often discussed faith. Time then asked, what role does faith play in your own leadership, and what role should faith play in government and in the public sphere? The Russian leader's response was measured. He said, first and foremost, we should be governed by common sense, but common sense should be based on moral principles first, he said. And it is not possible today to have morality separated from religious values. I will not expand, as I don't want to impose my views on people who have different viewpoints. In a follow-up question, Putin was asked if he believes in a supreme God, and he shot back, do you? He then declined to share his specific beliefs on the matter. He said, there are things I believe which should not, in my position at least, be shared with the public at large for everyone's consumption, because that would look like self-advertising or a political striptease, he said. The mysteries around Putin persist as his brutal invasion of Ukraine marches on. While the motives and internal beliefs might not be obvious, understanding the Orthodox divide gives a lens into a sliver of the overarching battle. Now I want to look at another article about it. This is from religionfacts.com, and it's titled, Vladimir Putin and Religion. Vladimir Putin was born in St. Petersburg, Russia, on October 7th, 1952. He's got the same birth date as my grandfather, actually, October 7th. Different year, but wow. He has been the president of the Russian Federation since May 7th, 2017. He was also Russian Prime Minister from 1999 to 2000, President from 2000 to 2008, and Prime Minister from 2008 to 2012. Putin's personal religion. Vladimir Putin's father was an atheist, and his mother was an Orthodox Christian. Vladimir was baptized into the Orthodox Church as an infant. In an interview with Russian journalists published in 2000, Putin explained the significance of his well-known Orthodox cross pendant. In 1993, when I worked on the Leningrad City Council, I went to Israel as part of an official delegation. Mama gave me my baptismal cross to get it blessed at the Lord's tomb. I did as she said, and then put the cross around my neck. I have never taken it off since. That's really surprising, huh? In 2012, Putin was honored in Bethlehem, and a street was named after him. In 2014, Slate described Putin as a committed believer who surrounds himself with other influential people of faith and regularly invokes God in his public statements. In 2016, Putin made a half-day pilgrimage to Mount Athos, an important Orthodox monastery in Greece. Putin's religious policies. Buddhism, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are defined by law as Russia's traditional religions and a part of Russia's historical heritage. These religions have enjoyed limited state support in the Putin era. Construction and restoration of Orthodox churches started in the 1990s has continued under Putin, as has the teaching of religion in schools. Parents can choose for their children to learn one of the traditional religions or secular ethics. Putin took an active personal part in promoting the act of canonical communion with the Moscow Patriarchate, signed May 17, 2007, that restored relations between the Moscow-based Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia after the 80-year schism. In a presidential address in 2014, Putin emphasized the religious importance of the Crimea for Russia. It was in Crimea, in the ancient city of Chersonsis, or Korsun, as ancient Russian chronicles called it, that Grand Prince Vladimir was baptized before bringing Christianity to Rus. R-U-S. In addition to ethnic similarity, a common language, common elements of their material culture, a common territory, even though its borders were not marked then, and in a sense common economy and government, Christianity was a powerful spiritual unifying force that helped involve various tribes and tribal unions of the vast Eastern Slavic world in the creation of a Russian nation and Russian state. It was thanks to this spiritual unity that our forefathers, for the first time and forevermore, saw themselves as a united nation. All of this allows us to say that Crimea, the ancient Korsun, and Sevastopol have invaluable civilizational and even sacral importance for Russia, like the Temple Mount in Jerusalem for the followers of Islam and Judaism. In July 2016, Putin signed a new anti-extremism law that, among other things, limits the sharing of religious beliefs to state-registered places of worship only. Critics say this law is in violation of Russia's constitution, in that it effectively outlaws minority foreign religions such as Protestant Christianity, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Hare Krishna, whose churches and temples are rarely approved to be registered with the state. And I want to read one statement that's really important. by this Christian brother. Says Prime Minister Vladimir Putin on May 9th, 2008, pledged to transform Russia into a financial world leader, saying that he would work to make Russia one of the main financial centers in the world. He said that trying to make Russia a center of world finance could very likely give the Zionist international bankers some good, healthy competition. So that's something very interesting to ponder. And of course, we know that the Sanhedrin wants to make the global government and the global world court sit there in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount with the 70 nations as part of the world court with the Sanhedrin. So could this partially be what is stoking these fires to bring about the last days events where the people in the Sanhedrin want to be the world court and they want to be top dog with everyone else beneath them, all the nations? Now it's really interesting that there's this church, the Assumption or Dormition Cathedral, the main Orthodox Church of Kharkiv, is Ukraine's second largest city. And that's where they're talking about the Russians being right now, almost taking over that place, that city. So let me read this from religionnews.com. This will give us a little bit more information. The physical landscape of Ukraine isn't the only battle space Russian invaders hope to dominate. For the past decade, the two countries have fought another battle, not over territory, but the religious orientation of Ukraine. And if Russia occupies the country, religious freedom will be one of the many casualties. Ukraine is an ancient nation dating back to at least the 10th century with an Eastern Christian identity at its root. Founded in the crossroads of Europe and Asia, Ukraine is the second largest European country, second only to Russia. While many faiths operate freely in Ukraine, such as Roman Catholics, evangelicals, Muslims, and Jews, the country's population of 43 million is overwhelmingly Christian and predominantly identifies with Orthodoxy. But the question is, which Orthodoxy? Russian President Vladimir Putin has used the common Orthodox character of Russia and Ukraine in his arguments for closer alignment. Ukraine is unique in that several expressions of Eastern Christianity are practiced there. On one side is the Russian Orthodox Church and its Ukrainian denomination, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate. On the other is the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Kiev Patriarchate. Putin's efforts to restore Russian prestige have included elevating the Russian Orthodox Church to the center of Russian identity while also undermining the independence of the Moscow Patriarch. Putin's Ukraine scheme included leveraging the potential religious soft power of the Moscow-aligned Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate. According to the Orthodox Times, Russia used disinformation campaigns to stir conflict between the churches. These efforts came to a head in the late 2018 when the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Kiev Patriarchate, sought from the Ecumenical Patriarchate of the Orthodox Church, autocephaly, afraid of Russian interference. The Kiev Patriarchate believed attaining independence through autocephalous status would allow the OCU-KP to break free from the Moscow Patriarchate, removing itself from under its authority. The Orthodox Church of Ukraine becoming free was a declaration of independence from foreign influence and achieved greater religious freedom. Then Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko declared that autocephaly was another example of Ukraine pivoting away from Moscow and toward Europe. In response, the Russian Orthodox Church cut all relations with the ecumenical patriarch, threatening to split Orthodoxy. With war at hand, these religious battles will recede to the background for the time being. However, people on both sides are turning to their faith. Images of Ukrainians praying throughout the country were posted on Twitter Wednesday, February 23rd, when the attack started. Other non-Orthodox Christians noted how Christians on both sides are fighting. Tanks are rolling down from Russia. Russian Orthodox priests are blessing the tanks, while the Ukrainian Orthodox priests are blessing the Ukrainian soldiers to fight against Russia. What does all this mean for Ukrainian religious life tomorrow? Putin cited NATO expansion as the casus belli, among other issues, fearing Ukraine's reorientation to the West. But Ukraine's religious reorientation is also a concern. The president of the European People's Party, Donald Tusk, cited sources saying Putin's demands are also connected with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and its independence from Moscow. De facto, what Putin wants is the full capitulation of Ukraine. The capitulation sought is both physical and spiritual. Indeed, Russian control of Ukraine would be a humanitarian disaster and a humanitarian rights catastrophe, and the implications for religious freedom in Ukraine would be dire. The U.S. government has ranked Russia as one of the worst in the world for religious freedom at home. If Russia's military campaign is successful, Moscow would likely not countenance an independent Orthodox Church of Ukraine, possibly forcing it back into the family of the Russian Orthodox Church. Russia's regressive treatment of Jehovah's Witnesses, Muslims, and proselytizing groups would likely be forced on the entire country. Concerns about Ukraine's Jewish community also exist. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum condemned Putin's exploitation of the Holocaust as a pretext for war. The museum stands with the Ukrainian people, including thousands of Holocaust survivors still living in the country. Whatever the outcome, the future is uncertain. The Prussian strategist Karl von Clausewitz said, "War is the continuation of politics by other means." War was probably the only outcome Putin wanted. The implications for Ukrainian religious freedom and other human rights, however, hang in the balance. Let me just share a little bit about Putin making an emotional visit to Jerusalem. This was printed in the ArmenianDiaspora.com, dated April 29th of 2005. Mid-East, Putin makes emotional visit to Jerusalem by Alessandro Largoshino. Moscow, April 29th. Long minutes of solitary meditation in the Holy Sepulchre Basilica, deep emotion at the Yad Vashem Museum. These are moments of President Vladimir Putin's visit to Jerusalem on the eve of the Orthodox Easter, which that year was on May 1st. Putin first met the director of the Yad Vashem Museum, Shevach Weiss, who accompanied him in the halls of the museum dedicated to the Holocaust. Weiss said, "Nobody has ever been as emotional as Putin." The people who accompanied the Russian president during his visit to the Holy Land seemed just as touched. The trip has many surprising aspects, according to what Andrei Kolishnikov, the most famous journalist following the president's visit, wrote on the pages of opposition newspaper Kommersant. Putin decided to make his visit as soon as he arrived from Cairo, despite the fact that it was already dark. The Holy Sepulchre Basilica had already been closed when Putin arrived, and was opened especially for him. Putin immediately stood in front of the plate on which Jesus' body, supposedly, had been laid down, and prayed for 10 minutes, much longer than expected. An Armenian priest led him to the hole worshipped as the one where Christ's cross had been fixed. Here the president again wanted to remain alone and knelt down. A priest approached him sometime later to tell him that it was probably time to go. Putin followed the priest, but then told him to wait, went back and knelt down again, loosened his tie, and put a small crucifix, a gift from his mother, which he has been wearing for years, in the hole. It took longer before Putin left the basilica, which keeps precious gifts from Russian Tsar Alexander III, and headed for the residence of the Orthodox Archimandrite who represents the Moscow Patriarchate in the Holy Land. This short stop preceded Putin's last visit during his stay in Jerusalem, a pilgrimage to the Western Wall. So I guess you can see from this some of the things that some of us didn't know about Vladimir Putin. I would have to say too that seizing all of his assets and leaders that are loyal to him, their assets, financial as well as personal property, it seems like this would definitely be an attempt to prevent Vladimir Putin from becoming a financial world center. And that seems like maybe what they might be trying to stop. So I thought you might find a little bit of this information a little bit fascinating, and a little bit more detail and knowledge about things that have gone on with his beliefs and his background. So let's just pray for these leaders and pray that God works on their hearts and God performs his will, as he said that all things are under his hand and he's moving players into place to perform his will. So for now, I'm signing out. Good night.